I couldn't. I love the night. That's the only time I feel really alive.
It's what David wanted.
Blood, I was to find, was a necessity as well.
A vampire in love with a slayer. It's rather poetic. I am the monster the breathing men would kill. I am Dracula.
Good evening, my fellow vampire lovers. The sun is going down, and you know what that means. It's time for me to record another episode of my podcast, The Beautiful Dead. As always, I'm your host, Alina Nazari. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. It's all The Beautiful Dead podcast. Or you can go into the video description and click on the Discord link and come join us where we talk about vampires all day, every day. That's how I'm getting most of my requests now too, because we're so active in there all the time. So if you want to request something, then please, you can comment in this video, you can find me on social media, or you can come into the Discord and let me know. I do try and pay very close attention to all of the requests. This week's movie was requested by Techno Coco. So he has requested things before. He's very active in all my stuff, so I thank him for that and also for this request. This is something that I did the first season when we were audio only. So it was time to bring it back to YouTube. I am very surprised how many people do not know this movie. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to share because I happen to have it on DVD here. Also, in the DVD, there's this whole booklet. And inside the booklet is like the director's notes and the backstories on each character. So if you guys are interested in me reading through this as like a bonus episode, let me know and I will do that for you. But I just thought it was really interesting. And it's part of the Criterion collection now, which is awesome. Like, congrats to everyone involved. All right, tonight we are talking about Cronos. Guillermo Del Toro's first writing, directing, everything. Very exciting. This is one of those movies that if you are big into vampire movies and media, you know Cronos. It's one of the movies you got to see before you die on everybody's lists. And we do have a couple great crossovers. So I am going to give a crossover to Guillermo Del Toro, although he's not in it. He did write and direct it. And of course, he gave us The Strain. So we have a vampiric crossover. And yes, someday I'm going to tackle The Strain, but I'm going to need a lot of time to do that. And then Ron Perlman. Ron Perlman is in this, and then he, of course, was in Blade 2. So we have a vampire crossover there, which is very exciting. Considering it was filmed in Mexico, that's surprising to have two crossovers like that. All right, if you have never listened to this podcast or watched this channel, massive spoiler alert. I am going to talk about it from beginning to end. It's the only way for us to like catch all the vampire stuff and really talk about it. So consider this your spoiler alert. If you have never seen this, you're like 40 years late. So I don't know. I don't think it's very easy to find right now. I'm lucky I have it on DVD. This is another one of those where I'm like lucky to have it on DVD, like What We Do in the Shadows. All right, let's talk about it. So I just want to give you a heads up. I'm going to read it to you as I wrote it because I take my notes as I'm actively watching it and I try to pause as little as possible just for time's sake. So in my notes, Ron Perlman's character is Angel on Hell, I guess you would say. But I called him Ron. And then his uncle is Manuel de la Guardia, I believe. And I just called him Uncle. So that's how I'm going to read it. Because why not? That's how my brain works. I'm like very quickly trying to type stuff out. And for this one, it's a mix of English and Spanish. So when the Spanish was going, I had to take notes and I had to read subtitles because my Spanish is rocky. I could understand 25 to 30% of the Spanish. So I had to pay attention, especially because I don't want to miss any of the vampire stuff. All right, I think I've rambled on long enough. Let's talk about Guillermo del Toro's Cronos. So we open in the past, and we get a voiceover. And the voiceover explains to us that it's 1538, and this man called the Alchemist was fleeing from the Inquisition, and he was like the appointed watchmaker to some big head honcho. And his like life's determination was to make what he calls the Cronos device. That's all you need to know for now. 400 years later, in 1937, part of the vault in a building collapsed, and in the rubble was a man with marble skin who was pierced through the chest, and this was the Alchemist. So 400 years later, still alive. When his residence was located, what they found they never fully revealed to the public. And this is where we get to see a pan through his living space, and there's bowls of blood, and there is a naked woman hanging upside down, dripping into the bowl. After the investigation, the mansion and its contents were sold, but the Cronos device was not listed, so it's possible that it never existed. But then we see it inside of an angel statue, and then we get our title. So it hits the ground running. Now it's present day. We see an older man, his wife, and his granddaughter eating breakfast. So this is Jesus. His granddaughter is Aurora, and his wife is Mercedes. And I knew there was an age difference because he has white hair and she has very vibrant hair. I mean, hair coloring happens, but I looked in here. It's a 15-year age difference. So she's 48 and he is 62 or 63, I believe. So big age difference. They're eating breakfast, and you could see that like he adores his granddaughter. His wife was like really hard on her. Now they head to the antique shop for the day, and this is his antique shop. She goes to play, he collects the mail. Then he pulls a letter out of his sweater, puts it in the mail, and gives it to her. So we assume that he's doing something playful in there, like it's a letter. I think it's supposed to be a letter from Santa, because this is set at Christmas time. So I'm assuming that this is a letter from Santa that he's handed her, but we never see that. Later, a man enters and is looking for something, obviously, because he's like unwrapping any antique that has paper still on it. And when he unwraps one that is an angel statue, he runs outside. Now we see Jesus is doing a puzzle with his granddaughter, and he's singing, and unseen by them, the now unwrapped archangel statue, which has a hole where one of the eyes should be, we start to see roaches crawling out of it. So he kills all the roaches, and he realizes the statue is hollow, so he starts to take it apart, probably to be sure that he's killing off any roaches inside this statue. And he finds something in the base of the statue that is wrapped in a cloth. So he takes a handkerchief, he picks it up, he unwraps it, and it looks like a golden egg. And it looks like it is actual gold. Outside the shop, the man who was in earlier is talking to another man who's on a cell phone, and they both look super stressed. So now we cut to a warehouse where Ron Perlman answers the phone and is told another statue has been found. So he goes, fine, I'll tell him. He walks through the warehouse, he takes an elevator up to the office/living quarters of his uncle. We see that his uncle is extremely worried about germs. So his uncle lives in this sterilized space, and there is a door to get in, but then there's also like just a opening. I can't think of the name of it, but you can lift it up to like slide food in and shut it. So Ron enters his uncle's space, and he's got a mask, he's got gloves, he's got booties over his shoes, there's plastic on everything. He takes in a tray for his uncle to eat, and we see that his uncle is sitting on a bed. There's like plastic around everything. He's got a humidifier running, he's got medical equipment everywhere. So obviously his uncle is very sick. And he goes in, and we see that there's all these angel statues hanging from the ceiling in this space covered in plastic. Ron explains the buyer just called. They found another archangel statue. Ron says, this time you get someone else to pick up your garbage. The uncle pulls out this drawing on like brown, ancient brown paper, and he says, this is not garbage. This will be mine. So now we're back at the antique store. Ron shows up, he sees the angel statue, he says he wants it, he pays this exorbitant price, and Jesus starts to wrap it up for him. As that's happening, Ron plays with Aurora and gives her gum, and he's very charming and silly and fun, and then he leaves. Later, Jesus is cleaning the golden egg, and he lifts it up in his palm, and he starts to turn this like winding mechanism on top. Out of the egg comes 6 legs, and it grabs onto his hand. And so he like pulls it off, but not before these legs puncture him, and he's bleeding all over the egg and all over the floor and the countertop and stuff. He sets it down, and the legs retract back in. Now we cut to Jesus's wife. She is a dance teacher. She's teaching couples how to tango, and Jesus arrives with Aurora, and he's got this bloody hand wrapped in a handkerchief, and he's looking very ashamed. Now we cut to his wife cleaning the wounds for him, and she pulls out this like gold stinger. It looks like a bee stinger. And he tells her he cut it on glass, and he looks over at Aurora like, don't tell her the truth. That night he's in the fridge, and he drinks an entire pitcher of water. So we see that he's starting to develop a thirst. Then he sees raw meat that's bloody, like on a plate, probably for dinner the next day, and he's staring at it like he wants it, but he doesn't do it. He walks around the house, he's like itchy, he's sweaty, he's itching the hand, he's opening the window to get air, he's like hyperventilating, he's going a little bit crazy. He gets a hold of the Cronos device, and he lets it dig into his hand again, and he's like praying and convulsing. And we see that the gears inside it surround some kind of larvae, and it's like pulsing and coming back to life. Unbeknownst to him, Aurora is awake and is looking down and watching all this happen. Once he sees her, he's like, I'm okay, it's okay. And then he puts the Cronos into his PJ pocket. The next morning, he's looking in the mirror at himself, and he's clearly gotten younger. And he decides to shave his mustache. He comes down, he kisses his wife, who's like aghast. And she's like, you look younger. And he's like, that's how I feel. So the turn has started. So he's regressing in age, and he is feeling great. He doesn't have body aches anymore. And then we cut to the store. It's just him this time. He didn't take Aurora this time. And he realizes that the lock has been cut, and he goes inside, and the store has been ransacked. And left behind was a card that says LaGuardia Enterprises, and someone wrote on the back, we're open all night. So he goes to the LaGuardia warehouse, and he sees Ron, and he's like, you destroyed my shop. And Ron goes, I'm not the one you want to talk to. So now we cut to Jesus, and he's up in the uncle's apartment. And the uncle shares this like old little book, and it's written in backwards Latin, and it describes a device that has an insect inside that gives you eternal life. But there are rules you have to follow. Uncle tells Jesus he's dying. He's been through chemo, he's been through radiation, he's got these jars of chunks in it, and he's like, this is my body piece by piece. I'm thinking those are like tumors or growths that he's kept. So obviously he has cancer. And Jesus has brought the shoebox. So the uncle grabs the shoebox, and he sees Jesus's bandaged hand, and he's like, you used it. And then he tells Jesus to get out, but not before he says, we both have something to lose. Ominous. LaGuardia opens the box to see that it's just a bunch of padlocks taped together. Over the loudspeaker in the warehouse says Jesus is running out. Ron says, keep playing your game. He's back at his house. He pulls out the real shoebox, but it's empty. So he's like, oh God, Aurora. So he runs up to this space. It's like he goes up to the roof and into what looks like a storage area. It was probably meant to be a second apartment, or I don't know. But he goes into it, and there's like junk everywhere, but there's a big trunk full of toys, and there's like a table set up with tea. So clearly this is where she goes to play. And she's hiding. So he starts talking into the room, and he's like, are you scared that something's going to happen to me like what happened to your dad? And then he tells this story of when her dad, his son, was little, this son learned about like lung cancer. So when Jesus gets home from work, his cigarettes are missing. And so he tries to find his cigarettes, and he finds like little pieces of tobacco floating in the toilet. And so he and his son like have a discussion, and the son realizes like taking this pack of cigarettes is not going to change anything. He's just going to get more. But now Jesus is aware that his son is worried, which affected him. So she comes out and she shows him that the Cronos device is hidden inside her teddy bear. Then we see him in the bathroom, and the Cronos device is now on his chest, like his upper pec. The wife knocks on the door and says, "We're going to be late." So he takes the device off and says to it, "What are you, little one? Are you a god? You're good for me." Then he puts it back into the bear, and he notices that some of the blood coming out of the puncture wounds is like sticky. So he's starting clearly to, I'm thinking the insect is inserting something into him, or he's starting to obviously change. And then seconds later, the puncture wounds are healed. So our turn is progressing. He is noticeably younger. He's very spry. Then we cut to them at a New Year's Eve party, and they're dancing, and he sings to her, and they kiss, and they're being very affectionate all night, and they're affectionate at the table later. And then he notices a man at the party has a bloody nose, and he stands and he's like rubbing at his lips, and he follows the man into the bathroom. And anytime someone mentions Cronos, this is the scene I think of. This is the scene. It has stuck with me since the first time I watched it. So this is a good time for a vampire pause, okay? So the turn occurs after the Cronos device first punctures you. That very first puncture starts the process. So immediately you start to get younger, your body starts to regenerate, but you also have this extreme thirst. So it has begun. All right, so he follows the guy into the bathroom. The guy's bleeding everywhere, but finally he gets the nosebleed to stop and he leaves the bathroom. Jesus sees the blood on the counter and he starts to like rub his finger through it and like gather it together, almost like he's gonna push it towards his mouth. But then someone comes out of the stall, so he like stands up real quick. The guy who comes out of the stall sees the blood and he's like, "Oh my God, people are so gross," and he cleans up all the blood. Then he leaves. Jesus sees blood on the floor, and he gets down and he licks it up off the floor. Oh. Then we see him down on the floor. We see shoes come up, and then he gets kicked in the face, and then he gets drug out. And this is happening like as they're counting down to midnight. The clock strikes midnight. We see Ron. He's in a car. Jesus is passed out on the passenger side. They're like parked looking over this cliff to the town. So Ron starts to wake him up, well, first, so I'm blanking on his name already. Jesus kind of starts to come to, so Ron just like pours liquor in his mouth, and that brings him totally out of it. And Ron starts to rough him up, and he's like, "Tell me where it is, or my uncle won't leave me alone." So they come out of the car, he's beating him up. He asks Jesus, "What is this thing that my uncle wants so bad?" So if you can't tell, this is a completely different day. I am fresh home from the gym, so this is what I look like right after the gym. And I decided to sit down and start editing, only to realize that 18 minutes of the footage is completely unusable. So all I can do is re-record it. So that's what we're going to do right now. And then I will stop and go back to the previous recording when we get there. But all right, bear with me. So we were just talking about when Ron is kicking his ass outside of the car. So he starts beating him up, and he says, "Tell me where it is, or my uncle won't leave me alone." And then he says to Jesus, he's like, "What is it that my uncle wants so bad?" And Jesus is like, he thinks it will help him live forever. And Ron's like kicking his ass, and then he like lays down and he starts laughing, and he's like, all this guy does is piss and shit all day long. Why would he want to live forever? So then he gets up and he starts punching Jesus again, and he knocks Jesus out, and he leans over and he's like, "Get up, get up, get up." But Jesus is not getting up. So Ron puts Jesus back in the car and pushes the car over the cliff to, I guess, set it up like it was an accident, because he probably thought he killed the guy, which he didn't. So then we see the car go over, and Jesus is now lying half out of the car, upside down. He's bleeding. And we hear his inner thoughts, and he's begging not to die, but he does. In her bed, Aurora sits up. Then we cut to a morgue. Jesus is being stitched up. Uh-oh, why did my computer just die? Oh my God, my heart just stopped. This is another one of those videos where everything that can go wrong has gone wrong. In the morgue, Jesus' mouth is being stitched together, and then they're like staple gunning this gash in his forehead, and then he's using putty to try and clean it up, only for the attendant to be told, you know, the guy's going to be cremated per his widow's request. Then we see Ron. He's back in the warehouse, and he's being summoned by his uncle. And his uncle wants to know what happened to Jesus. And Ron is like, oh, he died in a car accident. It wasn't my fault. The uncle is pissed. And he's like, did you check his heart? Was it pierced? And Ron says, the guy was dead. So the uncle is like, listen up, dummy. You know nothing about death. So I have one more job for you, and you better not screw this up. Now we cut to the funeral, and Ron is walking into the funeral. He goes to the casket and he pinches Jesus' nose to make sure the guy's really dead. After the funeral, we see the morgue attendant. He's preparing to put this wooden coffin into the crematorium, but he can't get it to light. So he goes downstairs, he fixes a gas line, comes back up, gets it lit, and he pushes the lid down, but we can see from the other side that the casket is now empty. The attendant does not see this. So he pushes the coffin in, and it's burning, and he sits down to like eat a banana when Ron comes in and says that he was a friend of the deceased. He just wants to see him one more time. And the attendant is like, okay, medium rare or like super crispy, because he's in that fire. So Ron looks in, starts laughing. Then we cut to Jesus. He's out on the street, and he's like gray, and you could see all the putty all over his face. And he steps on a piece of glass. He pulls the glass shard out and uses it to cut the stitches in his mouth. Then he goes into a trash barrel. He finds a blanket to wrap around himself. And then he sees his own obituary in the paper. At his house, his wife is grieving, and the phone rings, and she answers it. Jesus says her name, so she hangs up, and then we see that Aurora was listening on the other side. He goes to his house. Aurora lets him in and gives him a towel. Up in the storage room on the roof, this like her little playroom, she's emptying out her toy trunk, and he has placed the Cronos device back on his hand. She places a pillow inside the trunk just as the sun starts to break through holes in the roof, and it starts to burn him. He gets in the trunk. Aurora closes it. So vampire pause. So I think what this is like we've seen this in other things where the turn starts when you get the thing into you, but it doesn't completely, you don't turn full vampire until you die. So like we see this in Vampire Diaries, we see this in other things, but he has now completed the full turn because now he's being burned by the sun. So that's how I took this. Please let me know if you think it's different. All right, so she's like painting on the walls all day as he sleeps, and then we see the sun go down. He wakes up and he starts to write a letter to his wife, and it's actually really sweet because he keeps getting frustrated and crumpling it up and throwing the paper, and Aurora picks it up and puts it in a wagon, and you can see there's so many balls of paper. So he's trying time and time again to write this letter that he wants to write. But he basically says, if this is alive, this is painful, I'm very thirsty, and he says, Aurora will stay with you. She's going to give you this letter, and by the time you read it, I'll be gone, but I hope when I get back, you will want to see me despite my appearance. So now we cut to the warehouse. Jesus is there at night. He's snuck in, and he realizes that Aurora has followed him. He says, I told you not to come. She pulls out the Cronos device, and he's like, put it away. They're going to hurt us if they see it. Upstairs, he uses the tray opening, the food opening. I think it's called a server's window. I think, don't hold me to that. It's called a server's window. So he slides Aurora in, and then she opens the door from the inside to let him in. So they start searching through drawers, and they're looking for this manual, probably so he can figure out like what is happening to me and what am I supposed to do now. Aurora finds it, but then we see that the uncle is sleeping in the bed, so he stays there 24/7. So she gives the book to Jesus, and Jesus starts reading it when the uncle comes up behind them and says, I knew you'd be back. And he says, I ate the missing pages. You're never going to find them. Jesus says, you talked about eternity, but look at me. I'm rotting. And the uncle screams, peel it off.
Peel it off.
Peel it off. And he starts peeling off Jesus' skin, and underneath is the marble skin that we saw on the alchemist at the beginning of the movie. Then the uncle, unbeknownst to Jesus and Aurora, has hit the buzzer to call his nephew. Uncle tells Jesus, you're transforming. You need blood. And Jesus goes, human? And the uncle, this is such a great line. He says,
Of course, you can't gain eternity with a cow or a pig.
you don't get eternity from a cow or a pig. And then he says, if you smash the device, then you're going to die. But we could share it, and we could share eternity. And there is a way out. So he says, give me the device. Jesus takes it from the bear. And meanwhile, the uncle has turned his back to Jesus. And we see that one of his canes, he uses 2 canes, is a blade cane. So here's another blade knife. Or blade cane. I'm telling you, I gotta find a cane that's like also a sword. This is the 3rd time we've seen this. Anywho, he turns back around and Jesus says, before I give this to you, I want the way out. And the uncle goes, okay, and then stabs him. Jesus falls to the ground. The uncle climbs on top of him and says, now the heart. So clearly you have to stake the heart, pierce the heart for this vampire to die. Aurora knocks the uncle out with a blow to the head on the back of his head with his other cane. Meanwhile, Ron is walkie-talkieing up and he's like, Uncle, answer me, answer me. Why aren't you answering me? Uncle. We see Jesus sees the blood coming out of the uncle's head wound, and he drops to his knees and starts drinking from the man as poor Aurora is watching. She is going to need so much therapy, this poor little girl. They hear Ron coming up in the elevator, so Jesus and Aurora run. Ron comes in and sees his dead uncle, and he is thrilled. He's jumping up and down, and he's like, it's mine, it's all mine, 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 mine. Then his uncle reaches out for him, and Ron's like, nah, you kept me waiting long enough, and he kills his uncle. Then he hears footsteps, and he turns and he says, you, and then he gets whacked in the face. Aurora and Jesus climb out of a window and onto the roof as Ron follows. They climb up the scaffolding to a sign, the sign that's at the top of this warehouse. They climb the scaffolding, they're up to the sign, and Jesus helps Aurora get onto this ladder that descends down the front of the building. Ron and Jesus fight. It ends with Jesus grabbing Ron and throwing them both off the building. We see them now on the ground. Aurora comes up with her bear and puts the Cronos device on his chest. It digs in, and then we see this insect inside the Cronos start to fill back up with blood, starts to pulsate, and Jesus gets up. He's got debris sticking out from all over him, and he starts to peel off the skin on his abdomen to reveal this marble skin underneath. He looks over and he sees Aurora is bleeding, and you can see he is so tempted to drink this blood. And she says, it's her only line in the whole movie. She says, grandfather. He throws himself back. He rips the Cronos off, and then he starts smashing it. And this is where Past Me can now take back over. Perfect timing, because now my kid is calling me. So return to Past Me. And then he starts to gasp and he kind of collapses down. And he starts to say, I am Jesus Grease. Jesus Grease. I am Jesus Grease. And he's just like continually repeating this. Cut to him, all marble. He's laying in a bed. He's deep breathing. Aurora comes up and lays her head on his chest. The sun starts to rise as Mercedes comes in. He reaches his hand up. She kisses it. Credits. So that is Cronos. That is Cronos. I don't know how many people who are watching this video have seen this movie. It is to my personal opinion, very impactful, and I will talk about it. But that is how it ends. Let's talk about tropes I love, tropes I hate. We're gonna rate it, and then I'm gonna tell you my thoughts about this movie. Tropes I love and tropes I hate. You guys know I prefer my vampires to have fangs. They do not have fangs in this one. That being said, this is kind of like a hunger situation, and the fact that this is a very rare, special breed of vampire. And it's created by this insect inside the Cronos. And it's almost like it's altering your human DNA with its DNA. And then it gives you bloodlust and eternal life and marble skin. So I can't really nitpick the fangs because he's this very rare species of vampire. He's not a classic vampire by any means. So I really didn't let that bother me. I mean, he's got the aversion to sun and he lives forever and he wants blood. So like a lot of it is there in place. He just does not have fangs. That's the only thing. But there was nothing in here. It's really hard to hate on this movie because it is such a rare breed of vampire. All right, let's do the ratings. You guys, you probably know where I'm going with this. How sexy or alluring is the vampire of Cronos? I will give him a point for becoming younger and more agile and clearly getting like his desires back, but he already loved his wife. He already lusted after his wife. All it's doing is bringing back the youthful vigor and like bringing back the way he was when he was a 40 as opposed to 60, right? He doesn't have any kind of special allure. He's not going to head into a club and start an orgy. So I will give him 1 for being a vampire, 1 for living forever as a younger version of himself. But that's kind of it. So he gets 2 out of 10 onks for sexiness and allure. The point of this movie is not sensuality or anything like that. It really is about like the idea of aging and the fear of aging. All right. How evil or scary is the vampire of Cronos? So this vampire is so extremely rare. Only those with the Cronos are turned, and they have to die first. When they come back, they're like rotting and they have to pull off their human skin. So once they're marble, they're not going to blend in. It's gonna make it very hard for them to like walk amongst humans. They are bound by the sun. If they die, they need the Cronos to bring them back. So you need somebody that's like there to get that Cronos onto you. They do lust for blood. And a worse person would be out there killing a bunch of people right away. I mean, we see that with the alchemist. He's like bleeding a naked girl. So clearly he'd been doing that for centuries to still have been alive. I want to say like maintained his morality. So despite being overcome by this Cronos device, his morality of what was right and what was wrong, his love for his family did not falter. He chooses to destroy the Cronos to save them, knowing it will kill him. So I'm going to give him 1 for having bloodlust and 1 for if you have the Cronos, you can live forever, but that's it. It's 2 out of 10 stakes to the heart for scariness and evil when it comes to the Cronos vampire. It's just so rare. That's the thing. And now the Cronos is destroyed. But if the Cronos were still out there, there would be 1 of these vampires. So, all right, my thoughts. It is very rare for a movie that I watch for this podcast to move me to tears, especially when I've already seen it, but it did. I ended the movie last night and started crying. It really moves you. The relationship with his granddaughter, he's so kind and sweet. And yes, he gets very caught up in the power of the Cronos, which I think anybody would, but not so much that he lets it hurt his family. And he writes this sweet letter to his wife, and then he sacrifices himself for his wife and granddaughter. This is a movie that every time I watch it, I appreciate it more and more and more. The first time I watched it, I don't think I fully understood it. And the more I watch it, like The Hunger, you know, the older I get and the more I recognize like the fear of aging and how it impacts you, the more I understand this like this obsession or how quickly you could be overcome by the idea that this thing will bring your youth back. So it's so impactful the more you watch it. I love when the writer gets really, really creative with vampires, and this one, like Miriam in The Hunger, is very unique. And this one is interesting because Miriam was more of like a goddess, but this was a man-made creation, which is so intriguing. I would have loved a prequel just about the alchemist and the creation of this device and what happened in those 400 years. I wish we had learned more about the rules. You know, the uncle says like, well, you have to follow rules, and he's got this whole book, but we never get to really learn about the Cronos. And I read through this manual that's inside the DVD case, and it doesn't give you a lot either. So it really leaves a lot up to your imagination. It's really hard to get a grasp on the vampire around this. It all happens so quickly. Obviously, you can live for as long as you want because the alchemist lived 400 years, but that's because he was draining women into bowls. So clearly you need a lot of blood, and Jesus would have ended up there if he had not been such a good person and destroyed the Cronos. I would love to know if you have seen this movie, if you are even aware of this movie until now. I would love to know. I highly recommend you watch it. And then come back next week because we're going to do another request. This one was requested in the Discord, so go into the video description, click on that link, and come talk vampires with us 24/7. And this movie is called Blood and Donuts. Let me know if you have seen it. I cannot wait to talk to you about it next week. In the meantime, I love you guys. I wish you wicked hugs and bloody kisses. Good evening.
And big finish. Thank